United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Bobby.
Mr. Trax?
Here.
Ms. Laird?
Here.
Mr. Lawson?
Here.
Mr. Brynick?
Here.
Mr. Eskin?
Here.
Mr. Slade?
Here.
Proof of publication for tonight's meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we can go get right to it.
Yes.
Attorney Sweat?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is the time and date that the Township Supervisor scheduled a public hearing on the amendment to the Union Township zoning map based upon the development of Scarmazzi homes on a 79-acre parcel along Route 88. I'm just going to spend a couple minutes explaining the procedure because it can be confusing. Originally, this property was owned by the Dawson family and it consisted of 79 acres, all zoned C2. That's a commercial designation. Scarmazzi Homes presented an application to develop a planned residential development on this property. A PRD, planned residential development, is not permitted in a C2 zone. And he requested that this property be rezoned to a combination of C2 and RD. PRDs are permitted in an RD zoning district. And that his plan that was submitted at the time be approved as a tentative plan under the conditional use designation. That happened back in 2019. Mr. Scarmazzi went through the process, submitted a tentative plan that showed the rezoning of his 79 acres into a portion at C2 along Route 88, and then the balance in two separate parcels, both designated RD. The plan was to develop this plan in 3 phases. Our zoning ordinance permits the board to approve a planned residential development as a conditional use, hence the reason for the hearing in 2019. After a hearing, reviewed by the township engineer, public comment at the time, the board approved this location for PRD conditional use status and also approved the tentative plan that was submitted. And that's really what happens in a PRD zoning process. The developer submits a tentative plan. That tentative plan showed the rezoning of this property into C2 and RD. The decision that was handed down by the board required that before the applicant, Scarmazzi Homes, received final approval of the plan. And that's the process. You start with a tentative plan. If there are conditions that have to be met, such as land development, other conditions imposed as part of the hearing, once those are met, the applicant is then entitled to final approval and then can proceed with the development. The board voted to approve the rezoning at the time, but said, we want you to go through the formal subdivision and delineate with meets and bounds exactly the location of the C2 section of this property and the location of the RD sections of the property. That took some time, but ultimately the applicant did submit a subdivision that was approved and was recorded. That was a requirement of the conditional use approval of the PRD. So that had to be done before the applicant was in a position to request final approval of the plan. And the purpose of this hearing now is to acknowledge the recording of that subdivision, to confirm, which has been done through a letter from our engineer, that the initial tentative plan that was submitted is not substantially changed in any way, and that the meets and bounds are properly identified. With that, the zoning ordinance rezoning these parcels can then be signed, and the zoning map can be changed accordingly. Okay, so with that, I just want to say for the record, we're going to introduce the following exhibits. The proposed ordinance and zoning map will be submitted as Exhibit A. Advertising proofs of tonight's hearing that ran in the Observer Reporter on May 27 and June 3rd shall be hearing Exhibit B. The Township Zoning Officer, Jared D'Amico, has provided a list of property addresses located within 300 feet of the subject property excuse me, that were sent the required written notice on May 17, 2020. This is hearing Exhibit number C, and it's 2 pages that shows the addresses of those individuals that were identified on the assessment records. The zoning officer has also provided pictures dated June 7, 2021, showing notice of the hearing being posted in multiple places on the property. This will be hearing Exhibit D. Union Township Planning Agency recommended the ordinance be scheduled for hearing at its June 9th, 2021 meeting. Those minutes have not yet been motioned and approved by the planning agency, but that did occur. By letter dated May 10, 2021, the Washington County Planning Commission provided its review of the proposed ordinance and offered no specific comments. This will be hearing Exhibit E. The actual decision that contains the findings of fact and conclusions of law on the application of Scarmazzi Homes to classify this property as a conditional use planned residential development and to rezone the property in sections of C2 and RD is Exhibit F. The actual subdivision that was approved and is recorded in the Office of Recorder of Deeds of Washington County and identified as the subdivision plan for Highland Village that identifies the parcels, parcel 1 being RD, parcel 2 being an RD, and parcel 1 and parcel 3 are RD. Parcel 2, which is along Route 88, is C2. It stays C2, which is what it was all along. And lastly, the letter that was submitted by James Harshman, the township engineer, dated June 17, 2021, will be identified as hearing Exhibit H. Mr. Harshman, in his letter, confirms the application requesting the property be rezoned was reviewed by the necessary parties and approved as part of the 2019 hearing and decision referenced above. The letter verifies the subdivision was recorded and specifically states, quote, "It is proper at this time to prepare the required ordinance and update the township and township zoning map," end of quote. That will be the record. If anybody would like to look at any of the exhibits, they're here for your review. I was the hearing officer that presided over the 2019 PRD conditional use hearing. I prepared the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and that was approved by the Board of Supervisors. I've reviewed the most recent submittals, and there has not been any significant change, if any at all, from the tentative plan as we proceed towards the final plan. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions or comments from the supervisors.
I have none.
If not, we'll at this time entertain any public comment you may have on this here.
Before we do that, would you like, or would the stenographer like to swear everybody in?
Well, if anybody wants to make a statement or anything, you need to raise your right hand and let the stenographer, we'll have a mass swearing in, if you will.
Anyone that's going to speak, raise your right hand, please. Solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
You're first, then. Ma'am, your name and your address for the record.
Okay, my name's Sandy Granger, and I live 328 Patterson Road, Bethel Park.
Sandy Granger?
Granger, Granger. I don't know if this pertains to anything, but as you're looking at Scarmazzi property up behind it, what is that building that sits all the way up there? behind, when you take the road all the way out,
That's here, used to be a school.
a school. Didn't,
You mean the big yellow block building?
yeah, it's
That's.
like where it
that was a
says, do
school
not
that was
enter, don't
part
walk
of,
this
uh,
road.
One at a time. The stenographer needs to take down the comments.
That was part of, the church, they had a school over there. And, off to the left of that was some government, there was some government houses off to the left of that,
Okay.
which, I believe are owned by Mr. Van Voorst.
And is that property being used, or that building up there yet?
I believe that was sold, to another individual, what he's doing with it, I don't know.
So that could go C2 back up there, or it could be commercial, possibly, if they want it, right? If they sold it, it could go. Not just
I would have to
residential.
go to the township engineers to look at that on the map. I don't know whether that be commercial or, is it subject to change? That would have to be done through the legal channels from our engineer and, our solicitor.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
No other public comment before we close testimony? Okay, so Gary, do you have any action for the board?
Yeah, I would recommend a motion that approves the rezoning of the Scarmazzi property to be known as Highland Village, which would approve the ordinance that's been prepared as well as an amendment to the township zoning map.
I'd like to make that motion. I approve the, Scarmazzi development.
Ms. Dare,
Roll call.
Yes.
Ms. Dare, Mr. Lawson,
Yes.
Mr. Eskin,
Yes.
Mr. Trax.
Yes.
Mr. Brining.
Yes.
With that, I'll turn it back to Madam Chairman for any public comment.
Any more public comment outside of the testimony? Okay, then I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll say.
Mr. Trax,
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr.